Awesome. So why don't we just get into it? Um, Today I'm talking with Alex, who's the CEO of Partner Program. Thank you so much for taking the time, Alex. Can you just start by talking a little bit about yourself, your
Yes.
background, and sort of how you got into doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So my background is first and foremost an agency founder, ran a funnel building and marketing agency in San Diego for a while, helping clients with demand generation, lead capturing, all that kind of stuff. Worked a lot with hospitals and professional services. Then I got into SaaS marketing. So it was a quick dovetail into B2B marketing, joined a couple early stage SaaS companies, help them with overall marketing, planning, execution campaigns, all that stuff. From there, moved out to Chicago, and my first couple roles here in Chicago were user acquisition, VP of growth. Had a couple of those roles, and decided I really wanted to get back into the agency consulting business. So I didn't relaunch my agency, but I started doing consulting for platforms, marketplaces, SaaS, everything in between, mainly B2B stuff, but helping teams really figure out how to do that the first year, really, right? So a lot of that was software decision making. A lot of that was platform, what to actually build on for that MVP app, a lot of decisions around native iOS versus doing a web app, right? A lot of decisions around whether to partner with a CTO versus use an agency. A lot of decisions around whether to sign that 12-month contract with Salesforce or do something a little more lightweight and kind of make it for the first year until you get product market fit, right? So I found a lot of software companies and companies in general were just making rushed decisions on software, on agencies, on the platform, the code base. And those decisions were ending a lot of early stage companies because they were deciding to dive into the deep end when they should have probably been a little more lightweight for that first year and not committed to an iOS app or committed to a Salesforce contract or committed to a CTO just taking half equity, right? Or vice versa. Maybe it's a developer that needs a sales or product focused partner, right? But all of those really high committal decisions, right? That was what I was seeing a lot of. Even though my purview was developing that growth engine, I would still see it, and it kind of eked me a little bit. So I would kind of advise against it. A lot of times I would win and we'd be able to avoid it, but sometimes I wouldn't, and we'd go down that road. And oftentimes it ended, obviously 80% of those startups failed. So whether you blame that decision or a combination of all of them, it's just one of those things. So that became a marketplace that we developed that we recently let go, unfortunately, but we developed a really awesome community marketplace podcast around matchmaking between agencies that really knew what they were doing and SaaS companies. And in that process, building that marketplace where we would actually feature an agency or sometimes an internal marketer and what they were doing with the product, how they would actually use the software, the CRM. We would feature them, and then we develop inbound from people looking for that exact workflow. So it'd be like a lead generation workflow using these 2 tools or these 3 tools. Very few people know how to do it. Very few people have built it in this way. So we showcase that, and then we'll match make, right? And we developed this sort of system, and it was working. It wasn't really a business. It was just kind of like a blog with a podcast. And we learned that, another big issue is just the way software companies work with agencies, the way they actually partner, align with whatever agencies. Turns out that software companies were not putting as much emphasis on agency partnerships as a channel, as a growth channel. So they would start with content, they build out their content engine. they'd get their SEO in check. Then they'd start, running PPC campaigns. Then maybe they'd do some PR, podcast route, whatever. And then maybe later, they'd get to agency partnerships and they say, okay, well, what is this channel all about? Let's do this. So there was a little bit of a sort of a misprioritization in our minds of like how important are agency channels. We saw a lot of really awesome potential for agency partnership channels on SaaS side that weren't being exploited or leveraged or just looked at with close enough eyes. So then we thought, okay, well, what if we took our sort of matchmaking, highlighting, some consulting and some matchmaking consulting stuff in the mix and put that to work on agency channels, right? Agency partnerships, that whole world of developing those agency partnerships. And that became partnerprograms.io. So it's partnerprograms, plural.io. And we built this sort of system is what it is. The website has a list of vetted partner programs that we've taken through our system. And it also has on the back end, it has an agency only community where the agencies and our team, we look at all these new partnerships and partner programs. We will get involved with the ones we really like. We will, work with the ones that we think need a little bit extra help. We will match them with agencies that we think are a fit. And we do an accelerator that's coming up in August, a 90-day accelerator for partner teams that don't really know how to work with agencies. And then, and then we have a whole bunch of stuff going on in 2021 as well. And that's what we're up to. That's
super exciting. I'm really interested in this idea of using agencies as sort of a growth hack, if you will. Can you talk a little bit about just, why you think early stage companies should utilize agencies as a way to grow their business?
Yeah. So first, early stage is a loose term. Obviously, there are early stage companies that have tons of product market fit. They're still technically early stage, but the way we deem it is, there's a way to look at agencies in the very early stages. Like, let's just say you finished your product, you're past beta, you've got maybe a handful of active users that are loving it. You don't have product market fit yet, but you got a working product and you may even have a couple agency users. The way to look at agency partnerships at that stage is for feedback. And when I say agencies, that's another loose term. Agencies are any third party that have influence over your buyer's decision to buy your software, right? They are managing campaigns like a marketing agency. They are building software like a software development agency. They are managing your strategy, so SEO or consulting or sales or whatever. They're influencing the way those people internally look at software in one way or another. That's an agency. It could be accountants and they're influencing whether you use QuickBooks or Xero. They're still an agency. Now, when I'm an early stage or I'm talking to a very early stage founder where they're just past product market fit, maybe they just closed a seed round, something like that, I recommend that they start talking to agencies, not have an agency channel, a program, not have the whole infrastructure, but talk to them, because agencies are looking at your client's needs 6 months or a year from now. Their job is to be that expert, right? Their job is to know what that client needs to look at to make sure 6 months from now they're happy, right? So the right agencies, the good ones, of course. Some don't look at like that, but the point is, if I'm an early stage founder, I can talk to my customers and get product feedback real time. That's good, necessary, of course. But what's even better than that is putting your product in the hands of agencies and saying, if you give me your feedback, I'm going to get 10x the feedback value because you're implementing for 10 of my ideal customers, not 1, 10 of them at once. And you know that you've tried all these other tools and you may even use the other tools simultaneously. So your feedback is way more valuable than my one active user's feedback who doesn't even use all the features, doesn't really know my competitors that well, isn't really optimizing my tool. They're using it, but they're not an agency user. So what I try to get them to do is get their product in the hands of agents, give it away, give them the product, right? Let them use it, let them play with it, incentivize them however you can to use your product and create those feedback loops with those agency users. And then hopefully they love the product and they become a referral partner. And then later you can build your structure, your incentives, tracking, all that stuff later. Now for my partners that are a little further along, the ones that are past that sort of product market fit stage, they maybe have 20 to 50 employees and they're really moving. They've got the other channels worked out. I suggest, obviously, at that stage, as soon as you have product market fit, if you have the type of product that agencies can be a referral source for. It's not for everyone, but if the product ideally is used by the agency and also used by the agency's clients, that's ideal. You know, sometimes products are just used by the agencies, which means agencies aren't technically a partner source for you. They're just a source of users. Then in the middle, there's the agency can buy an account for themselves and use it themselves. Like HubSpot's a perfect example. Agencies that use HubSpot will use it themselves. Then they'll refer, then they'll learn how to sell it. Then they'll implement it throughout their client base. They'll even resell and do all that good stuff and be a different partner tier every year if they continue their training, right? But then there's tools like PandaDoc. It's a perfect example. PandaDoc really can only be used by the agency. It's not going to be something where the agency is going to go out and refer all their clients PandaDoc. They use it internally for their, you know, proposals and stuff like that. Most agencies don't have the client base to use PandaDoc as well. So it's a hard referral for that type of software, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, tools that are just used on the website itself, Shopify. Shopify is not something an agency is a user of. They refer, they implement, they customize.
Yeah.
The marketing agency doesn't have a Shopify store, right? So there's those three different tiers, and you know the ones on the latter half are the ones that really make for awesome partner programs, awesome from a founder's perspective. You're ready to like, okay, let's see how agencies are dealing with this referral process. And then once you get down that road, you know, you're going to learn so much about your product just going down the road of agency partnerships, that just the feedback loop in itself is the value. And then if it's successful, you can create potentially, you know, half of your incoming revenue through this agency channel, sometimes even more. But at the very minimum, you're getting that proper feedback loop started.
Yeah, awesome. That makes a lot of sense. You've touched on something that, as someone who's running an agency, deals with a lot, and it's trying to sort of convince people that your agency can provide value. You mentioned that there are good agencies and bad agencies. How does partnerprograms.io sort of vet agencies, and more generally, how do you think about vetting agencies when you're looking for one?
So vetting an agency to do a service or to be a partner of, to do a service. So, you know, it's obviously different per type of service. You know, some of them I look more at their tool base and their savviness on the different tools. You know, others, you know, it could be purely just the referral reputation, who introduced me to the agency. I don't think I've ever hired an agency that I've gone and searched for on Google, you know. So reviews of the agency on certain review sites like Clutch or whatever, those to me honestly don't matter a whole lot. They may be like third on the checkbox, but it's who else is using them with success, I think, is number one. Like, who in my network has referred me to that agency and what have they done with that agency? I'll just say this, it's hard to answer that question, but case studies for me don't really make a lot of sense to look at, especially early on. What I like to know is really, what is that agency actively doing right now with someone that, you know, I trust their opinion on, and hopefully has some of the same agendas as me, right? So if I happen to come across an agency cold, let's just say you posted something on LinkedIn, like a graph of a campaign, and I was bored and intrigued enough to click on it. The first couple of conversations that we'd have is really, okay, well, here's my product, here's what I do, here's my target audience. Like, have you worked with anybody like me before? And you say, yeah, actually, we have this client over here that we're doing this. And I probably pick your brain about how you are going about working with that client, and what sort of tactics and stuff that you're looking to do with that client. Some of the wins that you've had. That's obviously awesome. When development is on the table, I look at, development depending on how much I need to lean on the agency. So if it's a heavy UI UX plus coding plus management, that's going to be a really deep dive into, like, how are we going to actually project this entire project? How are we going to actually outline this project, and what are you going to charge me at each milestone? How are we going to do this? Because I can probably check the boxes. Can you do what I want you to do pretty early on based on your work? The rest is really, how does the business relationship work, and how fast and how fast and accurate are we going to be able to move? And that's a big part of it. Now with Bubble, we talk about Bubble and why we chose Bubble. Bubble started for us as just a very curious, like, hey, we have a marketplace we want to develop. It's two sides, we have agencies and we have partner teams. We want to match make programmatically. We want some things to happen, some workflows to happen. And, we want to also be able to move quickly from a UI perspective, right? So if I want to create a new page, I want to be able to duplicate another page, maybe tweak it a little bit, click on some text boxes, change that. And I want to be able to deploy a page, because I'm not a coder, but I can work my way around, a no-code app like WordPress or Webflow or Bubble. And I want to be able to do that, right? But I also want the database functionality, and I also want, that level of security and speed and all that stuff. So Bubble was an easy fit. Now, agencies in Bubble, that has been a very difficult thing to work through, because I learned by working my way around the agency ecosystem in Bubble that the agencies are much different. You don't have UI UX plus different code bases, plus you either have someone that wants to own the entire project and they'll just say, I don't touch it unless I own the whole thing. And then you have your contractors that are just, they're really learning Bubble with you almost. And they're inexpensive and they're willing to work, week to week or month to month, but they don't know Bubble either. And they saw Bubble as an opportunity to make some more money. So it's been a challenge to find good development help inside Bubble. Gotcha.
So as you mentioned, partner programs I saw was built on Bubble. It was built in only 30 days. And you've talked about other no-code tools. I'm interested just more generally, how did you first hear about no-code tools, and what sort of sparked your interest as you did that research?
Yeah, so no-code, the way I understand, it's been around for a while. The term obviously is getting a lot of exposure now with, Bubble, especially Webflow, I think are the two big ones that for website stuff. But the no-code XYZ has been around since, I'm thinking like, super metrics on top of Google Sheets and Airtable and like some of the, just the data workflow stuff that, we've all been doing for a long time. WordPress, it's no code more or less. So, no code is nothing new, but I think this new world of Bubble, Webflow is interesting, but there's downfalls, and there's big downfalls that I'm learning as I go too, that, it's a new world with these apps. And if you are a founder that is just getting into it, you definitely need to make sure you are consulting with the right team when you decide to get started, and you're not just really eager to get that carrot that is a fast, good-looking, easily editable product at the end of the day. There's so much more behind the scenes that once you try to iterate on that, you'll start to uncover. So you just got to be careful not to get too caught up in the no code and realize like what limitations that there are, you know.
Can you talk about just a couple of the limitations you've run into, or maybe one of the one major one that you run into?
Yeah. So first one, we obviously need SEO. We need search optimization. We need our content to be apparent on the same domain. So we looked at, okay, well, what about the blog? So we were on WordPress before. I've done a lot of subdirectory blogs. So my first knee-jerk reaction is, okay, well, let's just do the subdirectory route. So we have DigitalOcean in between another hosting platform and Bubble. So we maintained our WordPress blog. So if you go /resources/ that is the route for the blog. So we kind of solved that. So now Google still sees everything on the same domain. The sitemap can stay relatively the same. We just change the URLs. Okay, we think you have the problem somewhat solved by then. Now getting to the point where we have to do some things that require the Bubble domain to be partner programs, right? So Bubble, if you submit that domain, you set up the actual domain, the CNAME, and the actual records that you have to add. Turns out with a subdirectory, you cannot have Bubble CNAMEs in your host that the subdirectory is actually working through. That is the big challenge that we're trying to overcome as we speak, because we got around it. Like the site resolves, it works, that all is working. We're running into the issue with certain Google OAuth, certain login parameter stuff that is requiring us to add Bubble's CNAMEs, which we cannot do if we have our subdirectory set up the way we are. So this is a very first issue, okay? Second issue, we have a database of profiles that we display on the front end. Someone signs up, they create a profile. You'll see these top partner profiles on our site. Those profiles, you'll see when you click on them, there's this giant token attached. Yeah, they have /partner profile display /tap card or whatever it is. But if you delete the token, you cannot access that page with the content. The content gets pulled as soon as you click on the profile. It's not there until you click on it, which means to Google bots, they don't see the page when they try to resolve the site. They don't see the profile. So we have no partner profiles according to Google. Users can still get to them, so that's cool, but we need those to be SEO. Then we need those to resolve. That's the other big issue. So we're trying to work around this custom sitemap to make sure that those are resolved. But the way you do it with Bubble, and so far as I've learned, is to create the static pages programmatically. Like when someone actually creates a database entry, there has to be another system that creates the static page, whether it's manual or we haven't figured out what, to mimic that page. So you can have the database driven directory. Then you also over here, you have a static version of it using the same data, but it has to be, it's not pulled through JavaScript, right? So that's been an issue. JavaScript rendering, call it whatever you want. And then there's just layout issues that, Bubble doesn't really clarify too much. I mean, they have kind of a best practices, but everyone does it differently. So when you have multiple developers in there, the way the boxes, you know what I'm talking about, make sure everything is scaling correctly. That's been a big headache for us. So.
Okay, cool. I saw online that you found a freelancer to build your first app inside of Bubble. how did you go about looking for that freelancer and ultimately selecting the freelancer that you went with?
Yeah, I think we did a forum post. Had a few.
Uh-huh.
Some were what we considered out of our price range. Others were, good and middle of the price range, but they required very large, contract and ownership of everything,
Mm-hmm.
and just, and I was still in a sort of a product market fit for us, and we weren't sure we were even going to use this as our front end.
Yeah.
So I went with a more inexpensive, someone that understood software development. They didn't fully understand Bubble. So we
Mm-hmm.
both had to work together and say, okay, well, you understand how the software should work, the logic, you understand, they knew how to
Yeah.
create the UI. And then I actually used one of our UI UX agencies that owed us some hours to create the actual designs. So that helped us a lot. So they actually went in there without knowing
Awesome.
anything about Bubble and created the landing pages, the designs,
Mm-hmm.
which were not mobile friendly. They didn't have the boxes, best practices. They didn't have everything. They just basically threw things up there, right? And then my
Yeah.
Bubble developer went in, cleaned it up a little bit, but then I actually had to contract another subcontractor that was way better at Bubble, more expensive, but he agreed to go in, clean up the issues, record a couple videos of like what he did to make sure my other developer saw the best practice,
Yeah.
and that worked a little bit. But again, hindsight 2020, best practice with Bubble is to find an agency that can take you that full way and
Yeah.
commit to it, learn about it, of course, ask the right questions. Then once you're confident Bubble's the right platform for you, have an agency that can take you 100% and have them own the project and do it the right way. Don't try to just do UI UX over here, have someone try to put that together in Bubble inexpensively, and then run into the issues that we ran into.
Yeah. Awesome. That makes sense. Um, awesome. So that's all I have. Thank you again so much for taking the time to talk with me. Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug or anything you want to call out?
Yeah, we definitely want to work with Bubble developers. We love the idea of really awesome workflows and automations on top of Bubble. We have partners that would love to work with Bubble. There is a potential for any Bubble app developers that want to help SaaS companies with ChargeBeat integration. That one's a big one right now. So our partner ChargeBeat, they haven't really focused too much on Bubble. It's not a big use case for them, but it's becoming more and more prevalent. And there's a lot of forum chatter about people having issues with ChargeBeat's setup inside of Bubble. And ChargeBeat, if you don't know, is subscription billing for B2B SaaS. And it's a great product, but for some reason, it's not working inside of Bubble. So I found a Bubble developer that knew how to fix it. Pretty easy fix. They record a little video. There's a lot of opportunity for Bubble developers that want to partner with ChargeBee. And there's a lot of potential flow of leads that way from people having issues with ChargeBee integration. Further, Airtable. If anyone out there is good at Bubble plus Airtable, using Airtable as the back end for your Bubble site, please contact me. I have some jobs, money, opportunity there. So yeah, please reach out to me if you're Airtable expert plus Bubble expert.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex.
All right, Steve.